In the heart of the Viking lands, the icy winds whipped through the mountains, carrying with them the whispers of an ancient curse. Eric Thorvaldsson, the eldest son of the mighty Thorvald clan, stood at the edge of the cliff, looking out at the ocean below. His thoughts were consumed by the weight of his family's bloodshed. For years his father had ruled with an iron fist, leaving a trail of enemies and broken alliances in his wake. Eric, once proud of his lineage, now felt nothing but shame. His father had wronged too many, and now the curse his ancestors had spoken of seemed to be coming to fruition. Eric's heart was heavy with guilt, but the time had come for him to face the truth. As the wind howled around him, he heard a voice, his father's, echo in the distance. "You cannot escape what is written in the blood," the voice said, chilling Eric to his core. The curse had found them, and it was only a matter of time before it would claim everything Eric had ever known. Eric had spent his life running from the truth, but the truth always found a way back to him. He had tried to avoid the prophecy his family had spoken of, the curse that bound them to a fate of destruction. He had tried to ignore the ancient markings on the walls of his home, but they were a constant reminder of the bloodshed his family had caused. Now his younger brother, Olav, was caught in the same web of lies and violence that Eric had once been. Olav was reckless, driven by ambition, and hungry for power, traits that Eric had once shared, but no longer desired. Eric knew that Olav would follow in their father's footsteps if he wasn't stopped. As Eric entered the great hall of the Thorvald clan's fortress, Olav's laughter rang out. Eric turned to face him, his expression hardening. "You have no idea what you're dealing with," Eric said, his voice low and full of warning. "The curse is real, and it will destroy everything you love." But Olav only smiled, his eyes filled with the arrogance of youth. "I don't believe in curses, Eric. I believe in power," he replied, his words laced with contempt. The brothers' words hung heavy in the air, but it was not just anger that filled the hall, it was the curse itself. Eric had long suspected that the blood of their family was tainted, but it wasn't until that night that he truly understood the depth of the darkness that had consumed them. Their ancestor, the mighty Jorn Thorvald, had made a pact with the gods, trading his soul for power. The curse that had followed their bloodline for generations was the price of that deal, and now it was Eric's turn to face it. The winds outside howled louder, as if the gods themselves were angered by the family's betrayal. Eric turned to Olav, his expression now one of sorrow. "You'll never escape it," Eric said quietly. "The curse will follow you, just as it followed our father and his father before him." Olav's smug grin faltered for just a moment before he turned away, dismissing Eric's words as superstition. But Eric could see the doubt in his eyes. The curse had already begun to take hold. Later that night, Eric found himself alone in the great hall, the echoes of his father's voice lingering in his mind. The curse had been sealed in blood, and now the blood would flow again. The gods had always demanded sacrifice, but this time it would be different. Eric could feel the weight of his family's sins pressing down on him, suffocating him. There was no escaping the fate that had been written for him. He would have to make a choice, to accept the curse or fight against it. But deep down he knew there was no real choice. The curse was part of him, just as it had been part of his father. He could hear Olav's footsteps approaching from behind, and he turned to face his brother once more. Olav held a sword in his hand, a glint of malice in his eyes. "It's time to end this," Olav said, his voice cold. "You've been weak for too long, Eric. The blood of our ancestors flows through me now." Eric drew his own sword, ready to face his brother in a battle that would decide the fate of their family. The curse had already claimed so much. Now it would claim them both. The clash of swords rang out through the hall, a battle of brothers, each fighting not just for victory, but for their very soul. Eric was a seasoned warrior, but Olav's raw ambition gave him a ferocity that Eric had not expected. Each strike was filled with a lifetime of anger, regret, and the weight of their family's cursed bloodline. The fight seemed endless, the air thick with the sound of steel striking steel. But as Eric locked eyes with Olav, he realized the true cost of this battle. No matter who won, the curse would continue. It would consume them both, until there was nothing left but the remnants of a shattered family. With a final, forceful strike, Eric disarmed Olaf, sending his brother to the ground. But instead of finishing him, Eric paused, the weight of his decision heavy in his heart. "This isn't the way," Eric said, his voice filled with sorrow. "We can't keep fighting like this. The curse, it will never end." Olaf looked up at him, his eyes filled with hate and confusion. "Then what do you suggest, Eric?" he spat. Eric lowered his sword, looking out at the storm raging outside. "I suggest we end it. Together." Eric stood outside the longhouse, his breath visible in the frigid air, a reminder of the unforgiving lands they had claimed for generations. The storm had passed, but the weight of the curse that plagued his family remained. The moon hung low in the sky, casting an eerie light across the snow-covered ground. As he stared out into the distance, Eric couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in Olaf. His brother, once a follower of their father's vision, had grown restless, and Eric feared that the same ambition that had destroyed their family would now consume Olaf as well. "He's too far gone," Eric muttered under his breath. But deep down, he knew that he too was fighting the same battle, one for power, redemption, and survival. The prophecy was clear. Their bloodline was cursed, and they were bound by it. Eric's path was now set. He would either destroy the curse or be destroyed by it. But first, he needed to confront Olaf before the madness overtook him entirely. Inside the longhouse, the tension was palpable. Olaf paced back and forth, his hands clasped behind his back, his eyes alight with something Eric couldn't quite place. An ambition, perhaps, but there was also a spark of madness in his gaze. "You're wrong, Eric," Olaf said sharply, his voice cold and filled with venom. "The curse, it's a myth, a tale for children. What we need is power. We can conquer everything. This land, the gods, our very fate. I will not be shackled by some ancient legend." Eric watched his brother, the man he had once admired, now completely lost in his own thirst for control. "Olaf, listen to me," Eric pleaded, his voice hoarse. "You're not just challenging our family's legacy, you're challenging the gods themselves." But Olaf's face twisted with disdain. "The gods have no say in this, Eric. Only strength and blood matter. And soon it will be my bloodline that rules this land, not ours." As the words left his lips, Eric felt a chill run through him. This wasn't the brother he had grown up with. This was something darker. Eric felt a storm brewing within himself as he watched Olaf, the brother he once trusted, speak with such reckless certainty. He had always known that the thirst for power ran deep in their bloodline, but he had never imagined it would push Olaf this far. A part of him wanted to strike Olaf down right there, to end the madness before it spread any further. But Eric knew that violence alone wouldn't solve anything. As his brother continued to rant, Eric realized that the curse was not just a family burden, it was a test of loyalty, of resolve, and of morality. "If you go through with this," Eric said slowly, his voice filled with both sorrow and anger, "you'll be lost forever. The curse will claim you. It will claim all of us." But Olaf's eyes narrowed, and a twisted smile spread across his face. "Then let the curse come," Olaf said, his voice colder than the northern winds. "If it claims me, it claims me. But I'll take what I deserve first." Eric's heart sank as he realized that his brother had already crossed a line from which there would be no return. The night was heavy with silence after Olaf's declaration, and Eric could hear the distant howls of wolves in the cold night air. It was as if the world itself was holding its breath, waiting for what was to come. Eric couldn't let Olaf's path continue without consequence. He had to stop him, even if it meant a confrontation unlike any they had ever had before. But as Eric prepared to speak, a figure emerged from the shadows, their father's old mentor, Halldor, the shaman. Halldor had once warned Eric about the curse, but now he looked even older, his eyes clouded with wisdom and sorrow. "You cannot change what is destined, Eric," Halldor said softly, his voice low. The curse has been in your family's blood for centuries. It will not be stopped by force or by will. Eric turned to face the old man. Then what should I do? Watch as my brother destroys everything we've fought for. Haldur's gaze softened. No, he said, placing a hand on Eric's shoulder. But you must find another way, one that does not bind you to the same fate. Eric and Haldur spent the rest of the night in quiet conversation, the words exchanged between them both heavy with the weight of destiny. The old shaman spoke of ancient rituals, ways to break the curse that had haunted the Thorvald clan for generations. But Eric knew that whatever path he chose, it would come at a cost. The curse can be broken, Haldur said slowly, but not without sacrifice. The blood that was spilled must be repaid. Eric's heart pounded in his chest as he processed the old man's words. How much blood? Eric asked. Haldur's answer was not what Eric had hoped for. Enough to cleanse your family's sins. But who will be willing to pay that price? The question hung in the air as Eric left the longhouse and stepped back into the cold night. The moon shone brightly above, but the path ahead seemed darker than ever. He had no choice but to confront Olav, but the truth was clear. Only one brother could survive the curse. The night was silent as Eric made his way through the thick forest, the snow crunching beneath his boots. The moonlight filtered through the branches above, casting eerie shadows on the ground. The world seemed at peace, but Eric knew better. The weight of Haldur's words hung heavily on his mind. The curse could be broken, but at what cost? Eric couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. His thoughts were interrupted by the sudden rustling of leaves. His hand instinctively moved to the hilt of his sword as he turned to face the figure emerging from the shadows. It was Olav. I knew you'd come here, Olav said, his voice low and full of accusation. You think you can save me, Eric? You think you can fix everything with your talk of curses and blood? Eric stared at his brother, his expression cold. Olav, you don't understand, he said, his voice steady. This curse is real. It's been with our family for generations. If we don't stop it, it will destroy us all. Olav's eyes gleamed with a mixture of contempt and disbelief. You really believe in all that nonsense, don't you? He spat, taking a step closer to Eric. The gods, the curse. It's all just a way for you to justify your weakness. We are Vikings. We shape our own destiny. Eric could see the madness in his brother's eyes, a reflection of the same ambition that had once consumed their father. But now, Olav had crossed the line. I'm not weak, Eric replied firmly. I'm trying to save what's left of our family. Olav's lip curled into a sneer. There's nothing left to save, he said coldly. I will take what's mine. The throne, the land, everything that should have been ours. As Olav raised his hand, a cold wind swept through the forest as though the gods themselves were reacting to his words. Eric's grip tightened on his sword. Then we'll see whose fate is truly sealed, Eric said, stepping forward, ready for the fight that was inevitable. The clash of steel rang out through the forest as Eric and Olav met in a fury of movement. Eric's blade met Olav's with a force that shook the ground beneath them, sparks flying from the impact. The sound of their swords clashing was deafening, cutting through the silence of the cold night. Each strike was filled with years of resentment and regret. Eric fought with everything he had, fueled by the desire to save his brother from himself, to break the curse that had bound their family. But Olav fought with a ferocity that came from pure ambition, his eyes wild with the thrill of battle. This is it, Eric, Olav shouted, his voice filled with anger. This is our chance. We can claim everything we've ever deserved. Eric gritted his teeth, parrying Olav's strike. You don't understand, Olav, Eric said, his voice strained with the effort. The curse will consume us both if we continue this madness. The battle raged on, but Eric could feel the exhaustion setting in. Olav was relentless, his strength fueled by an unholy ambition. Eric's movements grew slower, his strikes less precise. The cold of the night seemed to seep into his bones, sapping his strength. With one final strike, Olav knocked Eric's sword from his hand, sending it skittering across the snow. Eric fell to his knees, the weight of the battle and the curse pressing down on him. Olav stood over him, panting, his chest heaving with the exhilaration of victory. "I told you, Eric," Olav said, his voice almost triumphant. "There's no escaping the curse. It's our birthright to rule, and now you will bow to me." Eric looked up at his brother, his eyes filled with both defiance and regret. "If you want to claim this family's throne, Olav, you'll have to kill me first." Olav sneered, raising his sword high, the glint of the blade catching the moonlight. "I will." Just as Olav's sword descended, a sharp cry echoed through the forest, a sound not of man, but of something ancient and powerful. The ground trembled beneath them, and a strange force seemed to ripple through the air. Both brothers froze, their eyes darting around as an unnatural cold swept through the clearing. From the darkness of the trees, a figure emerged, tall, cloaked in shadow, with eyes that glowed with an otherworldly light. The figure stepped forward, its presence causing the air to thicken. "Enough," the voice echoed, ancient and filled with power. Olav took a step back, eyes wide in disbelief. "Who are you?" he demanded. The figure did not answer, but simply extended a hand toward the brothers. "The bloodline is cursed, and its debt must be paid," the voice intoned. "Only one may walk free, and only one shall be chosen." The cold intensified as the figure's hand hovered above them, and Eric could feel the curse that had plagued his family stirring once more. The forest was unnervingly silent as Eric stood face to face with the mysterious figure. Its presence was overwhelming, as if the very air around them had thickened. Olav, still shaken from the sudden appearance of the figure, looked between Eric and the shadowy being, his eyes wide with a mixture of confusion and fear. "Who are you?" Olav demanded, his voice wavering for the first time. The figure did not respond immediately, but instead raised a hand, and with a single gesture, the winds began to swirl, swirling the snow around them. The shadows seemed to stretch and pulse with energy, as if the very earth beneath them was alive. "I am the keeper of fates," the figure said, its voice deep and resonant, carrying an ancient authority. "You stand on the precipice of your destiny. You may choose the path of your ancestors, or you may forge a new one. But the price will be great." Eric's heart pounded in his chest, his thoughts racing. The curse was real, but what did this figure mean by price? And what path would they take? Eric's mind raced. The figure had spoken of fate, of paths, but what choice did he truly have? The curse that had haunted his family for generations was no myth, no tale to scare children. It was real, and it would claim him, Olav, and anyone who stood in their way. "What do you mean by the price?" Eric asked, his voice tight with uncertainty. The figure's glowing eyes locked onto him, and for a moment, Eric felt as though the figure could see into his very soul. "The curse demands blood," the figure replied. "It has taken much from you already, but it will take more. To be free, you must make a sacrifice, one that will define your fate." Olav, still recovering from the shock, stepped forward, his eyes filled with suspicion. "What kind of sacrifice?" he asked, his voice tinged with greed. The figure's gaze shifted to Olav, and its eyes darkened. "One of blood, one of trust," it said cryptically. The weight of those words pressed down on Eric like a mountain. What would he have to give up? And would it even be enough to break the curse? Olav, never one to back down from a challenge, stepped forward, his chest puffed out with a mixture of defiance and ambition. "I'm ready to pay whatever price it takes," he said, his voice loud and confident. "I'll do whatever it takes to take what's mine." Eric's heart sank as he watched his brother, knowing that Olav's ambition was leading him down a dangerous path. The figure turned its gaze toward Olav, its eyes flickering with cold amusement. "You misunderstand," it said, its voice low and filled with ancient wisdom. "The price is not what you think. It is not power or wealth that you will gain." Olav frowned, his arrogance faltering for a moment. "Then what is it?" he demanded, his impatience growing. The figure's eyes glowed brighter as it spoke again, its tone now tinged with an eerie finality. "The curse will not spare you, Olav. It will claim all who are willing to sacrifice their own humanity for power. you will become something else, something not entirely human. That is the price you will pay. The words struck Eric like a blow, and he saw the flicker of doubt in his brother's eyes. But Olav, blinded by his ambition, refused to listen. The figure's words seemed to hang in the air as Olav's expression shifted from defiance to uncertainty. The wind grew colder, swirling the snow in a frenzy, as if reacting to the figure's power. Olav looked at Eric, his gaze searching for something, approval perhaps, or a sign that he had made the right choice. But Eric remained silent, torn between protecting his brother and knowing the truth of the curse. Olav's voice broke the silence. "I don't care about becoming something else," he said, his voice colder now, filled with determination. "I will do whatever it takes to claim what is rightfully mine." The figure nodded slowly, and a sinister smile crossed its lips. "So be it," it said, and with a swift motion, it extended its hand toward Olav. The air seemed to thicken as a dark shadow surrounded Olav, wrapping around him like a cloak. Eric stepped back, realizing with horror that Olav had sealed his fate. The curse had begun to claim him, and there would be no turning back. Eric stepped back, his breath heavy, as he watched Olav's transformation unfold before him. The curse had taken hold faster than he had feared, and now his brother was being consumed by it. Olav's body trembled as the dark energy surrounded him, and his eyes glowed with an unnatural light. His once proud features twisted into something monstrous, his humanity slipping away with each passing second. "No!" Eric shouted, rushing toward Olav. But it was too late. Olav's form had shifted, and before Eric's eyes his brother became something else entirely, a creature of darkness and fury, a vessel of the curse that had plagued their bloodline. Olav's voice, now twisted and unnatural, rang out in the cold night. "I am beyond you now, Eric. The curse has claimed me, and I am its master." Eric stood frozen, a mixture of grief and horror consuming him. The family he had known was gone, and the curse had claimed another victim. The forest stood still, the night air thick with the lingering traces of the curse that had consumed Olav. Eric could still hear his brother's twisted voice echoing in his mind, declaring his newfound power. The snow continued to fall, but it felt colder than before, as if the world itself had turned against him. He had failed Olav. He had failed his family. But the curse wasn't finished. Not yet. Eric knew what he had to do. He had to confront the curse head-on. The figure that had appeared earlier had made it clear: one brother would live, and one would die. As Eric looked around the clearing, the trees seemed to close in on him, a silent reminder of the curse that had haunted their family for generations. But Eric refused to let it claim him too. He wouldn't let Olav's fate become his own. His sword in hand, Eric made his way back toward the heart of the forest. He knew where the next step of his journey would take him, into the very depths of the curse itself. The path ahead was treacherous, both physically and mentally. Eric knew that to end the curse, he would have to journey deep into the heart of the land, where the old gods were said to dwell. There, he would face trials unlike any he had encountered before. But the real trial was the one within himself. The battle between his desire for redemption and the darkness threatening to consume him. As he walked, his thoughts turned to Olav. What had become of him? The man Eric once knew, his brother, was now a twisted reflection of that person. The curse had transformed him, but in truth, Olav had always harbored a deep darkness within himself. Eric had always known it, but he had never imagined it would lead to this. Now, the only thing left was to end it, one way or another. He couldn't bring Olav back, but he could stop the curse from spreading further. Hours passed, the landscape growing darker and more hostile with each step. Eric's legs ached, and the cold seeped deeper into his bones. But he pressed on, driven by the need to finish what had been started, to undo the wrongs that had been done. Finally, he arrived at the heart of the forest, a vast, ancient grove where the trees were twisted and gnarled, their branches clawing at the sky. In the center of the grove stood a stone altar, ancient and covered in moss. It was here that the curse had begun, where their ancestors had made their fateful bargain with the gods. As Eric approached the altar, he felt a strange energy in the air, a pulse that seemed to come from the earth itself. This was the place of his family's birthright, and its final resting place. He could feel the weight of the curse pressing down on him, as if the very land itself was waiting for him to make the next move. But as he stepped forward, a figure appeared in the shadows. Halldor, the old shaman. Halldor stepped forward, his old worn figure barely visible in the shadows. "You've come to the heart of the curse," he said, his voice rasping with age. "The place where it all began, where the god's power first bound your family to this fate." Eric turned to face the shaman, his eyes hard. "I came to end it, Halldor," he said. "The curse must die. It's taken enough from us." Halldor's expression softened, a flicker of sorrow crossing his features. "It is not so simple, Eric. The curse is not just a punishment. It is a consequence of choices made long before you were born. It is tied to your bloodline, to the very core of who you are." Eric clenched his fists, his resolve hardening. "Then I'll destroy it, no matter the cost. It has taken my brother, and now it will take me, if that is what it takes." Halldor stepped closer, placing a hand on Eric's shoulder. "The price you will pay may be more than you're willing to bear, Eric. Are you sure this is the path you want to take?" Eric turned away from Halldor, his gaze fixed on the stone altar. "I have no choice," he muttered to himself. "I must end this." With a deep breath, he placed his hand on the altar. The moment he did, a powerful force erupted from the stone, knocking him to his knees. His vision blurred as an ancient voice echoed in his mind, whispering words he couldn't quite understand. He felt the weight of his ancestors' sins pressing down on him, and for a moment he wondered if he could truly go through with this. But then, the figure of Olav appeared in his mind, his twisted, corrupted face staring back at him with hatred and despair. Eric's resolve strengthened. The curse would not claim him. Not today. He would fight for his family's future, no matter the cost. As he stood, the stone altar's energy began to settle, and the dark presence that had lingered over the land seemed to ease, just slightly. Eric's body trembled as he stood before the ancient altar. The curse pulsed through him, an overwhelming force that twisted his very being. Shadows swirled around him, and an ethereal voice echoed in the air. "You awaken what cannot be undone," it warned. Eric clenched his sword, his heart racing. He had come to face the curse, but its power was more than he had ever imagined. As the shadows enveloped him, Eric's thoughts shifted to his brother, the one who had fallen victim to this curse. "I will end this," Eric muttered through gritted teeth, stepping closer to the altar. The voice grew louder, deeper. "The curse is not just a curse of blood, Eric," it rumbled, "but one of choice. The sins of your family echo in the stones of this land, and you must decide if you will continue the cycle or end it." Eric's grip on his sword tightened. His father's actions had set the curse in motion, but it was his decision now. Could he break free from the weight of his family's sins? The shadows seemed to press in on him, but Eric stood his ground. "I will end this," he declared again, more resolute than ever. Eric's thoughts raced as the darkness around him intensified. He had come to break the curse, but its weight was suffocating. The face of Olav, his brother, appeared in the shadows, twisted by the curse. "You think you can escape what we are, Eric?" Olav's voice echoed, filled with malice. "You are no different from us." But Eric refused to be consumed by the darkness. "I'm not my ancestors," he shouted. "I am Eric Thorvaldsen, and I will end this." With a surge of energy, Eric plunged his sword into the heart of the altar, breaking the curse's grip on him. As Eric's sword drove deeper into the altar, a loud crack echoed through the air. The curse's hold shattered, and the oppressive darkness lifted. Eric staggered back, breathing heavily as the energy faded around him. Olav's image flickered one last time before vanishing completely. Eric collapsed to his knees, exhausted. "It's over," he whispered, the weight of the battle finally sinking in. But even as the curse lifted, Eric felt a deep sadness. His brother was lost to it forever. "I did what I had to," Eric murmured, wiping the sweat from his brow. As the first rays of dawn broke through the darkened sky, Eric rose to his feet. The curse was gone, but the cost was great. The weight of his family's sins had been lifted, but it was a bittersweet victory. He had freed himself, but at what cost? He had lost his brother, and in a way, he had lost himself too. "It's over," he said softly, walking away from the altar. The world felt different now, quieter, as if the very land had been freed from the curse that had bound it for so long. He walked toward the rising sun, ready to face whatever came next. Eric slowly regained consciousness, his body heavy with the weight of his battle. The land around him was unfamiliar, a vast, empty field. The moon hung high, casting long shadows. "Father," he heard the faint whisper in the wind. It was his father's voice, pulling him from the void. Eric stood shakily, feeling the loss of everything he had fought for, but also the potential for something new. The curse had brought him here, to this moment. "Eric," the voice called again, urging him to listen. But Eric could not turn back. Not now. He was determined to break the cycle of bloodshed that had cursed his family. Eric's heart thundered in his chest, as the voice of his father resonated again, stronger now. "The curse was not meant to destroy you," it said, "but to test your ability to sacrifice." Eric felt torn. He had spent so long in pursuit of vengeance, but now he had to face the truth. Could he truly break the cycle without losing his soul? The moment of clarity struck him like a thunderclap. The curse could not be vanquished through anger alone. He had to let go of the vengeance that had consumed him. The ground trembled beneath Eric's feet, and the familiar shape of Olav materialized before him, twisted by the curse. His brother's voice echoed in the air, filled with bitterness. "You think you can change what has been written, Eric?" Olav's form flickered, barely recognizable. But Eric stood firm, his heart no longer filled with the desire for vengeance. "I will break the curse," he said, his voice calm and unwavering. "I will not let it claim me." The ground rumbled as the ancient curse began to unravel. The presence of Olav, though twisted, began to fade. As the curse began to lift, Olav's image flickered one last time before fading completely. Eric felt the weight of the battle lift from his shoulders. The wind began to change, and the moonlight brightened, casting a soft light across the land. Eric's body felt lighter, as if a great burden had been removed. The curse had been broken, but the cost had been high. He had lost his brother, his family's legacy, yet he had gained something else. Freedom. Eric walked slowly away from the field, the weight of his journey finally sinking in. The curse had been broken, but it had come at a great cost. He had sacrificed his brother, his vengeance, and his own sense of peace to end the cycle of bloodshed. The world was quieter now, the storm within him finally subsiding. "It's over," he whispered to himself. The first rays of dawn broke through the sky, the promise of a new beginning shining brightly on the horizon.